right, hi everyone. Hi, welcome back. Welcome back. Everyone good? All right. I hope everyone either voted yesterday or if you didn't, you voted early. If you didn't vote, please consider doing it next time. It's a very important obligation. You are all smart people who are learned in the law, and you have a special place, especially for election of judges and other positions. So I hope you do take that in advance. I always find one thing remarkable at America. After every election, people might be griping, but there are no riots in the streets. One of the remarkable things about our country is after every election, there's a peaceful transition from one to the next. And that's no given. And it's really a testament to our republic that we've had this. If I can give you a brief history lesson. The disputed election of 1800, which you should study if you haven't studied already. President Jefferson basically tied in the Electoral College with Aaron Burr. And this was a very, very, very big deal. And it went through many ballots in the House, because the House decides what happens in the case of a tie. There were all these rumors that if Jefferson didn't win, there will be militias marching on the nation's capital to make him come into office. That, fortunately, didn't happen. Even in your own lifetimes, I think, at least. In the year 2000, we had the case of Bush v. Gore, where the Supreme Court effectively had to intervene to stop the Florida Supreme Court's selective recounts of certain ballots. And we can talk about that in common, whether that was an appropriate decision. But Al Gore, to his credit, said, I will stand by what the Supreme Court says, one way or the other. And it's not a given. In many countries in the world, after an election, there are coups, there are bloody overthrows, there are people shooting each other. Whatever voter fraud or corruption in this country pales in comparison to other nations. So we should all be happy that we have this election, and whether your candidate won or lost, that's almost secondary to the bigger process of how things work. Okay. All right. Any questions about that? So be happy, well, even if you're not happy. Okay. I'm wearing my red, white, and blue today just to rub it in. Kind of deliberate, but not really. A reminder outside. So you've probably gotten this email about this Title IX training. So Title IX is this federal statute that says any higher education institution that receives federal money, which is all of them basically, must not have any kind of gender discrimination. This is why female sports get funding at similar levels to male sports, but not really. But in theory, that's how it works. The school is required to make sure that every one of you does this training. It's going to take about an hour. It's probably not going to be very fun, but you should do it. And more importantly than you should do it, you have to do it, because if you don't, the school will punish you. And you probably got this email from the dean, which you may have ignored, but you should go back and read it. They may actually suspend your ability to register for classes, suspend your ability to access Stanley, turn off your student email account. They have different sticks at their disposal. So they actually sent us emails to say, remind your students to do this, which I'm doing now, and do it and get it over with. I think you have till the end of November to do it. I don't remember the date, but do it before you forget. Okay? That's what I figured. Yeah. So most people didn't read it. I think it was a PDF attachment or something stupid. Yeah. I don't know why people do attachments. Right. So basically, if you read it, it'll say if you don't do this, they'll suspend your Stanley account. See? Yeah. I mean, I don't know how enforcement works. They've never done this before, so I'm not sure how strictly they're going to enforce this, but just do it. Anyway.
It's very long.
It's very what? It's like an hour, yeah. They say 45 minutes. I'll leave at an hour.
After final due date. Thank you.
I think they need to have it by the end of the year or something, and they're afraid if you wait till after finals, you'll all disappear and go back to Christmas break.
Yeah.
So, in fairness, I think the email went about 2 months ago. Yeah, it was like September they sent it out. So okay. I think I learned about this like in September, so it's been out for at least a month, maybe longer. Okay. So you've been reminded, and probably other professors, they will remind you also. So don't act so surprised. I got to you first. All right. Other questions? What else is on your mind? Anything? Yes, sir. No, no. Nope. Nope. And I should actually note, you should be very, very careful about asking professors for this. I know it's a custom here, but it's actually fairly intrusive to ask professors to give you exam questions. It's not a good move. I've actually had emails from people who aren't even in my class from the SBA, and I didn't reply to them. It's an important prerogative of writing an exam, and asking professors in this manner, I would not recommend it. So note to yourself, your other class. If you want to donate, go for it. I don't give any incentives for it. But on the topic of the final exam, I have a proposal for you. So for our syllabus, I had scheduled a makeup day, which I've almost never actually had to use because we're right on pace. And I put a final review session for the last day, the 24th. Would you be okay, and I don't think you know, object, of moving the review session up to the 19th, and then you have nothing that week of the 24th? So basically, at that entire, okay. Yeah, no objections. Okay, I didn't think so. But here's the deal. Here's how I run the review sessions, and this actually might be a little bit trickier. I proctor one of my exam questions from last year. It's going to be a 90-minute question. I'll proctor it. I'll have the papers printed out. I'll give them to you, whatever. You can take it. That's the first 90 minutes. The second 90 minutes, I'm going to go over the A+ answer from last year or year before. I don't know which question I'll give. I'll decide later. So effectively, I need you for 3 hours semi-consecutively. Okay? On, I guess that's going to be a Wednesday, right? Do you all have the same class schedule? Okay, that makes it easier. Do you have class before this?
Yes.
You have class after it?
Yes.
At 2. So from 10:40 till 2, you're free. That's an hour and 20 minutes. Well, you can eat during the review. Okay. What time's your class after the 2 o'clock one? Okay, so class from 2 to 4, and then you have an hour and 45-minute break? Okay, so what I'd suggest, and this is not ideal, and what time's your previous class finish? 10:30? Okay, so what if we did something like this, right? We do, your class starts at 2, right? What if we did 10:40 to like 1:50? Okay? That's a roughly 2-hour block. I like to give 90 minutes to take the exam. You're not going to actually need 90 minutes, but I can give it to you. If you want, you can do it in advance and try it out yourselves. Since we only have a 2-hour block, yeah. I can't count. 10 to 11, 12. Yeah, okay, yeah. So this is a 3-hour, even better. Okay, this is basically a 3-hour block, right? So if you need the 90 minutes, you can take it. So I guess basically it'll be like this, from 10:40, a long day, to 12:10, right? Which is basically this class session. I'll proctor it, right? And then at 12:10, or maybe I'll make it like 12:20, just to give you some breathing time, right? We'll do the review, and then we can go till 1:50. I'm almost positive you won't need 90 minutes. I've done this a number of times before. No one's ever taken the full 90 minutes, but you have it. It'll be simulated conditions. You'll be in a classroom, no distractions. You'll be quiet. It might not be in this room because I might have to switch it up and go somewhere else at the second hour, but at least the first hour will be in this room so you can sit. And then the next 90 minutes, I will go over the A+ answer from last year. I'll show you various tips and things to think about and how to approach the exam and various techniques. You've already had, at this point, you'll have had the entire course. So you'll know everything that's on the exam, so there won't be any surprises. Okay, so is this okay? Is this working for just about everyone? And if it doesn't, No. This is going to be on the, we're going to move it up. Yeah, I mean, I had scheduled it for the 24th, but we don't need to be here that day. So basically this will be on November 19th, and I'll find a room. I'll find a room for this. Okay. Try to take this as seriously as you can. I've done this different ways in various points of the semester. Sometimes I do it during the exam period, but no one ever comes to that. I've done it the last week of class and people are distracted. So I think this actually might be a sweet spot where it's not the last week of class, but you're still somewhat in preparation mode. I used to give out a question in the middle of the semester. I found no one actually did it. And I found these midterms to be entirely not very effective because no one takes it seriously, so I don't do it anymore. Let's see. Okay, so I'll find a room, but basically you'll be in this room for the first 90 minutes, and then if you want to eat during the review session, I don't really care. That's fine, but just bring some food with you, and you'll have a few minutes to go run. Okay. All right. Any questions on that? All right. If you haven't already done so, go to the syllabus, and at the very tip top, there's a section for exams. I have 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, so basically 2, 4, 6. I have 7 full questions from the last couple of years. Okay, each exam has 2 questions. So there are 7 full questions for you to think about. I'd recommend you do as many of those as you can. When you're done, the A+ exam, the A+ paper's there. So you can see how your colleague from last year did it. I'm not that creative. If you look at my exam from last year, it will be in the same ballpark what I do this year. Not everyone puts their exams online. I do. I don't repeat questions. It will be something new, but the format will be more or less the same. And I might as well discuss this now because I have a few minutes, and I'm on a roll, so to speak. I can't even count 3 hours, but I can at least describe the exam. So this is my one from spring 2014, which is basically from last term. The exams, all of them, exact same format. You have 2 questions. You have 3 hours. You should probably allocate 90 minutes per question. They're of equal weight. So try to make sure. Time won't be an issue. I've never had anyone say time was an issue. Time won't be the problem. Your constraint, and I'll explain this in detail, is going to be the word limit. Okay? I impose a 500 word limit per question. So your total exam should not be more than 1,000 words, 500 words each. The reason why I do this is to level the playing field. Let me explain. Students in law school have different abilities to write quickly. I'm sure there are some people in this room, I was one of them, who can spit out 3,000 words in a 3-hour exam. They can just blab and throw, yeah, she's nodding, right? They can just throw everything they know on a piece of paper and pray that something they said was good enough to get some points, right? People are nodding. They know what I'm talking about. I did this very well. I could write a 4,000-word essay in 3 hours. I could just throw everything I know. And when most professors grade say, oh, yeah, that was a +1, +1, +1. There's no actual rubric, right? This is not like you're in middle school. So you just get enough points. You can't do that with me, right? You can't. I am giving every one of you the exact same canvas to write on. You all have the exact same number of words. It makes it horribly fair. Okay? Because I do not reward people who are verbose and who can just spit out stuff. You need to actually choose, is it this or this? I'm going to need to pick one because I can't just describe both. Okay? I know this sounds silly, but it makes it very easy to grade. And if you look at the A+ exam from last year, you'll see very quickly why this makes it easier for me to grade. Okay? Because I can compare 2 answers, right? So if one answer has an answer of, say, 50 words, the other answer has a word 50 words for a certain question, you both have the same space to compare. It makes it very easy to go one to the next. And I actually have my own internal a grading scheme, which works fairly well. The other aspect of this is time, right? Time's not going to be a factor. You're going to be able to read the answer, read the question, write your answer down. What you're going to spend most time on is refining your answer, making it as precise as possible, which is something that lawyers are not very good at. So this perhaps is a mini experiment in learning to write accurately and concisely, which is something that everyone should do, and perhaps they do not. Also, if nothing else, this gives you a sense of what I'm looking for, and that I'm not looking for a broad exposition of everything you know about a topic. Okay? And I make this clear in the exam, but what I'm really looking for is your analysis, right? I want to see, can you actually spot the issue? Can you actually tell me, how the issue turns out under a controlling rule of law? I want to know that, right? I don't need for you to recite for me the facts. I know the facts. I wrote the exam. In fact, the facts are right there. You don't need to recite them for me, right? I don't need for you to copy from your outline every rule of law you know, hoping that some of them are correct and that you get some points, right? I know that drill. You just copy every rule of law you know. Oh, here are the 4 elements of this test. Maybe it applies, okay? I want you to say, how does it turn out? So let me show you the question, and then this will give you a sense of what I'm looking for. Okay, so again, there's always going to be 2 questions, always 2 questions. And they're all going to be some sort of an open issue issue spotter test. What do I mean by that? The setup we like this, like you're a law clerk, or you're an associate at a law firm or whatever, right? And you have some sort of property dispute. So always, I promise, it'll be a property dispute, I promise, at least in this class, it will be. Okay? What happens? The exam will always tell you what the controlling law is. I'm not going to try to trick you on that. This is easy, right? New York, in this case, all modern property rules in your statement third of property, and also common law property for marital property, right? There's not going to be a trick about that, right? If I say you're in a common law jurisdiction, do not tell me about community property, okay? If I say you're in a first restatement jurisdiction, don't tell me about the California third restatement approach. There have been various points at this semester where I've actually distinguished. We said, okay, here's how the common law works, nebulously enough, and the modern law trends in this direction, right? It's not often going to be a clear one way or the other, but at least you have a sense of which is the modern and which is the common law approach. All right, so the question always has fact patterns. In case you didn't know, I'm probably going to ask you about future interests. I usually do. And usually it's going to be a series of events. On this date, this happens. On this date, this happens. On this date, this person conveys this property. Then this condition happens. It's going to be messy, right? Deliberately so. I make them very messy because you have to keep track. You're always going to have a couple pieces of land, maybe 4 or 5 pieces of land. You're going to have, 3 or 4 different people. Make it easy. They're always A, B, C, D. I just, the first person's name is always going to be like, apple and then banana, whatever. Makes it easy. So you can even write C or D in the exam. I know what you're talking about. Yeah, and then basically this question is just a series of on April 1st, on January 2nd, on February 1st, one thing after another. And in case you're squeamish, people will violently die quickly. They have to, because on property law, when people die, stuff happens. So there's going to be a lot of deaths, usually very sudden deaths in unexpected ways. Okay. The actual question itself will either say write like a memo or write a bench memo for a judge or whatever it is. And to make it easy, each question will have 5 subparts. Right? Why 5? Well, it's worth 50%, and there are 5 subparts. So for those of you good at math, you know that each question is worth 10 points. And again, this makes it very easy for me to score. Because say, okay, there's question 1. I'm going to score that on a scale of 1 to 10. If it's really crap, it's a 0, right? And if it's excellent, you get a 10. The more points you get, the better your score is. There's not some sort of arbitrary number of, oh yeah, +1, +1, +1. There's actually a method here to the scoring. People ask, okay, so what's the difference between a 7 and an 8 and a 9 and a 10? Well, there's no good way of describing it. Take a look at the A+ exam and try and copy that style. But at a high level, I want to see how deeply you know this stuff, right? If you can tell me, what the rule is for community property when someone dies, right? Okay, that might be enough to get you halfway there, like 5 points, right? And you say, okay, because of this rule, then the wife gets this. Okay, so maybe like 6 or 7 points. But you say, well, but also there's some exception to this because of whatever happened. Okay, that's like 8 or 9 points, right? And then if you give me like a really perfect answer, which I don't give a lot of 10s. 10s are actually fairly rare. You get the 10. Usually I stop at 9, but I'll save the 10s because I do try to keep. I try to reserve that for something that's basically perfect and what I'm looking for, and probably something else I didn't think of. So you're shooting for like the 8, 9 range if you want to get yourself good scores. And if you get straight 8s, that's what 8 times 5, that's 40, and you get about an 80. That's probably good enough for an A-. I mean, the way the curve works, you're usually in pretty good shape. So again, the 500 word limit with these 5 distinct questions. I think I do it in both issues. On the second one, yeah, also, can't remember. Yeah, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah, it's always 5 issues per question, and I can grade it fairly easily. And I have a spreadsheet, just add up the numbers, and that's your raw score. The curve always does its own thing because you might not know this, but you are on a forced curve, right? And there's this actually fairly elaborate spreadsheet that I have to follow, where your overall GPA can't be above a certain thing, and the average GPA can't be below a certain thing. There has to be no more than this many A's, no more than this many, B's and C's and whatever else. So there's some give, but with a class of about 60 or so, I'm somewhat constrained in how I can give. I usually try and, if the exam's going to try and give the higher end of the curve, but that doesn't always happen if the students don't perform as well. Okay? So go look through these questions. Try and take a 90-minute block and actually sit down and quiet room and try to answer the score. You should know at this point virtually everything on the exam. I mean, with what, 4 classes left, I mean, you're basically done with the semester, so you'll probably know just about everything. And by the time we have a review session the last day, I think you'll be in good shape. Okay. Questions? Mm-hmm.
For the word count, is that on
the software? Yeah, the software has a word count, and I think they give you like a test you can use on it to test it out. Do the test and just test at the word count. Now, invariably, a couple people decide to handwrite it. I mean, like usually 1 or 2 each year. No, don't laugh. I mean, some people prefer handwriting, and that's fine. I don't have any objection, but you still have to count your words. And it doesn't take much time as you think. It actually, it sounds annoying, but you get into a habit, you can count 500 words. It's basically like 3 written pages. That's not a lot. So even if you're writing in the blue books, skipping lines, it's like 3 pages. So you can basically count it fairly rapidly, but I still want a word count, so you don't get to skip the rules.
Can you abbreviate like simple absolute and simple?
Okay, so here's the deal. I'm okay with abbreviation so long as I can figure out what it is. If I can't figure out what it is, I can't ask you for clarification. So if you think it's obviously reasonable, like FSD, I probably know what you're talking about. I mean, if you want to be, this is not a trick, but if you write fee simple determinable as 1 word with no spaces, it's still 1 word, right? I know that sounds stupid, but if you don't put, but be careful. I had one student, so stupid. He or she wrote the entire paragraph with no spaces. It was painful to read. Don't do that. The entire paragraph was, because I could tell the student was running out of space, and he or she made the entire paragraph 1 word. I was so annoyed. I don't remember what I did, but I could barely read it because, I mean, they use capitalization to offset the words, but it was so hard to read. It was like this one mass of words. Don't do that. But if you want to write like fee simple absolute or fee simple determinable as 1 word, like, I'm okay with that. That's fine. I don't want you to blow it on abbreviations. I think maybe once someone used an abbreviation that I could not figure out what it was from the context, and I couldn't give credit for it. But virtually every other paper I've graded, I figured out the the abbreviations. Other question.
So that's right. Fee simple determinable year after FSD.
I mean, you can do that. I mean, people have done that. As long as, I mean, in other words, if I know what you're talking about, that's fine. But again, you're taking something of a chance because you don't get to clarify it to me afterwards, right? I don't get to say, hey, what do you mean? There's no review like that. So, but if you tell me what the word is, and I'll figure it out.
How does our word count in our program work? Because, like you said, you can do it in 1 paragraph, and that counts as 1 word.
Don't do that. Write normal English, right?
Our normal word counts work as it takes it by character. So
No, not by character. It's word count. It's word space, word space.
So every space.
Yeah, I don't care about your character count, right?
No, but I'm saying,
Right.
like, okay, for like a window, the word count works. Even if you write like 1 long word, it'll take every single character and it'll say 6 words.
I don't think so. Usually word counts by spaces.
That's how our language also works.
I mean, test it out. Go open exams up. I'm pretty sure it counts by spaces. What else? Anything else? Am I your first exam? It usually happens like that, which is, I don't know why, but it's usually the property one's the first one. I don't know. They often schedule them on weird days. Okay. Excuse me. All right. So any questions about that? All right. So then we'll plan on the Yeah, so the syllabus I'll change later. But basically on November 19th, you'll come in here at 10:40. I'll have the papers printed out and we can go over it. And then we'll probably have to move to another room, but I'll find a room later. Okay? I don't want you to be nervous, right? I want you to have confidence that you've actually done this before. You know, there'll be good papers, there'll be bad papers. I know that. Some of you will do very well, some of you won't. It happens every year. That's how the curve works. But I at least want you prepared as humanly possible. And take this seriously. Don't blow it off. Don't say, oh, it's not great, so I won't take it seriously. Take it seriously. This is for your own good. Very much more than a midterm. This is basically like 10 days before your exam. So this is pretty prime time. Good. Okie doke. All right, let's move on and let's talk about leases. Okay. So in our class last session, among other things, we discussed that leases come in different forms. You have the most simple one, which is the term of year, which says that this lease will end on January 1st, 2015, and not a day later. And these are things that aren't really renewed. They're set. They finish. We discussed the periodic tenancy, which is like, you know, the month to month or the year to year. And those continue basically indefinitely until either the landlord or the tenant moves to terminate the lease. We also discussed the tenancy at will, which is effectively not much different than the periodic tenancy. And again, both landlord and tenant reserve the right to terminate. The only difference is the landlord can terminate perhaps quicker with the at will than he could with the periodic. And then we discussed briefly, not too much because it's more important today, the tenancy at sufferance. Right, this is where you suffer because your tenant is holding over and is not vacating the unit on the day that he or she is supposed to vacate. And the tenancy at sufferance creates a couple problems, right? So the first one is he's holding over, right? Is this person continuing to pay rent? If the person continues to pay rent and the landlord actually starts cashing those checks, it can presume that the landlord has actually created a new lease of some sort, either periodic or at will, whatever it may be. If the landlord's not cashing the checks and wants the guy to scram and he doesn't leave, that creates other problems. And it creates not just problems for the landlord, it creates problems for the new tenant moving in. And that's the issue in the first case, is Hannan versus Dusch case, where what happens when you sign a lease to take an apartment, you walk in there your first day, and hey, some dude's still there from before. He's not leaving. And this actually fractures a division of opinions about how to handle these types of cases. All right. Okay, where was I last time? Thank you. Okay. All right, Carrie. So what happened in my my former Commonwealth of Virginia, Hannan versus Dusch?
So pretty much there is a lease for a certain piece of property for 15 years to begin on January 1st, 1928. So the plaintiff was actually supposed to come in possession of this land at the time. And so he shows up, someone's still there.
Yeah.
And so he's trying to figure out whether or not the person who actually leased to him, the defendant, is responsible for making sure the person is not on the property at that time.
Okay, good. All right, so Carrie, let me ask you this question. If you had signed a lease to move into an apartment somewhere, right? And the first day you get there, you take your keys, you open the door, and then there's some person there. What would you think of doing?
Well,
What's the first thing you would do?
first of all, I'd be pretty surprised.
Yeah, you'd be surprised.
I don't know. I mean, I think my first thought would probably be to go back to the person who leased it to me and say, what went wrong here? Like, why is there still someone here? Well, of course, I'd probably also be a little, I don't know. Maybe I'd go after the person that was there because I mean, they're still on my. If I was supposed to have possession of this, then why are they still there?
All right, Emily, what would you do?
I would go to the landlord and be like, why the heck is there somebody in the place that you told me I needed to?
Okay, so let me change hypothetical, Emily, for a second, right? So your lease begins January 1st, right? You walk in, you turn your keys, the apartment's empty. So, okay, cool. So you start living there, right? Then on January 2nd, the previous tenant also has keys. He says, hey, what are you doing in my apartment? What do you do then when he comes in on day 2?
Then I have to get him out.
Right. What would you do if it happened on day number 2? Would you call the landlord?
I have no idea what called the lease.
Yes, okay, exactly. And this is the issue of why this case is actually harder than you think, right? At first blush, you think, oh my God, how could it possibly be the case, right, that the landlord is not liable? How can that possibly be the rule? But if you think about it, if a trespasser came to your apartment any day of your lease, the first thing you do is you call the cops, right? I'm remember Texas, you get your gun. But in other words, you would not call the landlord and say, wait a minute, here's my lease, right? You'd call the cops.
Sorry, did it change the locks though?
Assume they didn't.
I'm sorry?
Assume they didn't. Right. I mean, that's a nice convenience to have. Assume they don't change the locks. Don't fight the hypo. So, right, I know. So I mean, but assume the locks are the same, right? You would call the cops, or you're gonna reach for your shotgun, right? But you're not going to call the landlord, right? So I think this actually teases out the question, right? Or even I can ask this for you, right? When you sign a lease for an apartment, what exactly are you acquiring? What exactly is the landlord giving you when you sign a lease for an apartment?
The right to the property and the use of the property.
Let's be very precise. What do you mean the right to the property?
As in it's the right to you exclusively using the property and your exclusive use of the property. So it's you do whatever you want with it under the property.
Okay, so so the leases that you all sign, right? I'm sure all of you sign leases, and it all says exactly what Reeb just said. It's the right to have it, the right to use it exclusively, right? In fact, if you have roommates, someone else, you need to get permission, right? But let's talk about a common law. Let's say you have a very simple lease. The lease has one sentence, right? I, Josh, lease Blackacre to you, Reeb, starting on July 1st for a term of 1 year. That's all it says. Reeb, what did I just give you? That's it. The lease is one sentence. That's it. All I said was I lease Blackacre to you for the term of 1 year beginning on July 1st. That's it.
Possession of the lease.
Did I give you anything of possession? Did I say anything of
No, you
possession?
didn't say anything possession. Let me use it.
Uh-huh. So this is something where all of you are somewhat prejudiced by modern law, right? All the leases which you sign have all these covenants, right? Which are basically promises. I promise the land will be in this condition. I promise you can use exclusively. I promise that there'll be no one else here. I promise this. I promise there'll be a swimming pool, right? But at common law, we didn't have all these promises. You didn't have these long form contracts. All you had was basically, I lease this to you. And in the absence of any covenants, Michael, in the absence of any promises, is there any explicit promise to say that you have it exclusively?
No.
No. What's the only thing that's given in the lease?
I mean, I guess the right to possession.
The legal right.
Yeah, not the.
All you have is the legal right to be there under the common law. You have the legal right to actually own, own's the wrong word. You have the legal right to have for a period of 1 year, whatever it is, Blackacre, right? So in our modern sense, of course you're giving this right to own it, but the contract which Mr. Dusch signed didn't have those promises in there, right? Dylan, how could the person moving in have gotten around this problem, having this holdover guy? What could they have done to avoid this problem? Exactly, right? Is there anything stopping the landlord and the incoming tenant from saying, hey, I heard that this guy is still in the apartment. I want you to covenant to me that on January 1st, when this lease starts, that guy's out, right? Dylan, could they have done that?
Yeah.
Would that have been enforceable? And what would have happened if on day number 1, the dude's still holding over? What could the new guy have done? Exactly. He could have sued the landlord first for damages, right? Whatever damages were incurred in not moving in, but also the landlord then on the hook for taking whatever legal action was necessary to evict the guy. Right? This is actually how things would have worked under the common law, right? But Jonathan, why is that something of a difficult rule for the person moving in?
Do they have to hire a lawyer? It's expensive.
No, assuming that no covenant is signed, right? Why is this? I think you're right. Why is this a difficult rule for the person moving in?
And they say that in a case like it's ridiculous to have people, have to go through the legal process.
Well, not just people, but which people? I think you're on the right track.
The lessee.
Yeah, the guy moving in, right? That's right. So the problem here, and I'll discuss English and the American. We'll get to there soon. But one of the problems with this common law rule is it puts on the burden on the person moving in to take care of all this stuff. So imagine you just signed the lease, you have all of your stuff, you're about to move into an apartment or a house or whatever, and then there's some guy there. So now rather than moving in, you don't have a place to live. You have to then go hire a lawyer, go to court, sue, and try and get the guy ejected. And that could take a lot of time. And then where are you going to live in the meantime? Also, as for Calvin, who's in the best position to know whether someone's holding over, the landlord or the person moving in? Of course. And who would be much more easier to take positions to get rid of the person holding over? Exactly, right? So one of the difficulties of this common law rule is that the landlord is really in the best spot to know that someone's holding over, right? The landlord really should be the one knowing that there's someone not getting out on time. And in fact, if the lease was actually signed months in advance, the landlord should know, hey, I should take some action to get rid of this holdover, right? There's a specific burden on the landlord to take care of this issue. Okay?
Make a difference if it's a commercial lease versus a residential?
I don't think either of these rules apply to commercial leases. I think I don't think. If I had to guess for commercial leases, you're under the common law rule, the American rule. If I had to guess.
That you have to deliver.
Well, but I'll caveat that, right? If you're signing a commercial lease, you're going to put a covenant in there because you're a sophisticated party, and say, on day number 1, I want sole possession of this property, and if that covenant was inserted into the contract, and on day number 1 someone was holding over, you could then sue the landlord. Right? There's another hand.
If the landlord's in the best position, why did they abandon the English rule if there's an implied covenant with the landlord?
Well, it's not clear if the English rule is actually abandoned. Actually, we'll do this in a second. Selena, tell me what was the statement of the English? How did the English handle this case?
For the English rule, there was an implied covenant that required the landlord to put the lessee in a position to actually possess the property.
Good. What does that mean, implied covenant? What does this word mean, implied?
Implied is not expressly written in there, but when you read it, it's just kind of assumed.
Who assumes it? No passive voice here. Who's assuming it?
The lessee.
No. Who's doing the assumption here? The court. The court. When we say implied, you always see the expression, right? Implied is a matter of law. That's a really nice way of saying the courts. Right? When they say implied as a matter of law, that's saying the courts are effectively reading that clause into the contract, as if the court took their red pen and wrote covenant of use, right? They just wrote that in. Implied sounds delicious, but I'm going for implied. Okay? As opposed to implied, which is also a funny word. So the courts effectively, into the English rule, read into the contracts this idea, and they say, listen, why would anyone be so stupid to sign a lease without guaranteeing possession on day number 1? Why would anyone do that? We'll pretend that this was such an obvious thing that they didn't think they needed to add it, right? No one even thinks you need to even write this in unless you have a jerk landlord like this guy who didn't get rid of the old tenant. So this was the English rule, but not all the states adopted this. Lou, what was the other approach which other states have relied on? America, right? What's the American rule?
And they say that the American rule says that it's just for legal possession, not
Yes. Is there any implied covenant to be solo use? That's right. So under the American rule, there's no implied covenant. We follow the lease as written. If the parties didn't add a covenant for possession, then the courts won't do it for them. If the tenant holds over, the remedy is not against the landlord. The remedy is against the holdover. So effectively what would have to happen is the person moving in would need to take to court the holdover. And what makes this difficult is you can't simply call the cops, right? So then Emily said you call the cops, right? You call the cops and you say, hey, look, Mr. Policeman, I have my lease here. And he says, oh yeah, I have my lease too. And I'm holding over, and I think my landlord is allowing me to hold over. So now you have a legal dispute, right? Often it's not exactly clear. You know, maybe the landlord's kind of shady, and he's also taking money from both people at the same time, right? Maybe the holdover's paying for it, and the new guy's paying for it. Who's correct there? That's actually, we'll discuss this in maybe 20 minutes. That's not an easy legal question. So it's not a case that the cop can just come and toss him out because he has a legal claim to be there. So the American rule puts people in a very tough spot. Questions? Guess which rule Texas has? American, yeah. God bless it. So I guess this is where the shotgun comes in. Right. So the issue is if you move in and the person's still there, your remedy lies with the tenant. Now, in virtually every case, any lease you sign will have a covenant in it, right? Any form lease you get from the state, any rental agreement you find anywhere on the internet, it will have a covenant saying, I promise that on day number 1, this apartment will be empty, right? I'm sure if you go back and read your leases, you'll see something like that. So in the event that you do move into an apartment in Texas and someone's holding over, you call your landlord and say, you deal with this, not me. What about paying rent during the time? Generally, you're not on the hook for the apartment if you're not living there, right? And in fact, if it actually happens that you're paying rent and the other guy's paying rent, the landlord can't double dip, and usually you get a refund, or at least one of you gets a refund. It's not clear who. Usually the person who's not living there gets the refund, right? It varies, but that's usually what happens. Questions?
Okay, so you said virtually all pharmacies have.
Yeah, I'm positive if you check the lease for where you live, there's going to be something that says you have the right to occupation alone. It'll be phrased differently. You'll study covenants next semester in Property 2. So don't worry too much about that now, but I'm positive that your lease has something about that. If it doesn't, I don't know, maybe the slumlords in Waco don't include that, but I'm positive yours has it.
You could probably get to it, but you said if you abandon the property, you're not on the hook, but unless it's an assignment, you can be on the hook, but you'll probably get to that under an assignment.
Yeah, let's talk about that later. Right?
Alright, so the American rule doesn't actually rear its head much.
No. I mean, as a matter of law, most states have adopted English rule, but this comes up. Yeah, it comes up in the event that people are in an American rule state and they probably sign a lease individually and they don't put those covenants in there. It may actually be a problem. But that's going to be fairly rare. Yes. The presumption is you need to put the covenant in. Yeah, I mean, if you put the covenant in, right, all these are default rules. What do you mean by default rule? This is what happens if you write, remember I said to Reeb, a 1-sentence lease. I lease you Blackacre. That's it. Nothing else, right? If that's all I write, then I'm stuck by the common law rule. But if I add covenants, I add promises, and the covenants and promises we agree to will control. Okay? Let's take a look at the question on 465. You want to read it, Flora? It's on question number 1. Problem number 1, that is.
Okay.
Oh, I'm sorry. I think it's 464 in the old version.
Okay, I'm just gonna.
Yeah, you can, you go for it. It's right there. If you can see that, okay.
Okay, he leases from L a large piece of open land to be used for hunting and trapping. After paying a year's rent in advance, he said that there is no. You want me to read the whole thing?
Yeah, you can. Actually, that's good. That's enough. Okay. So you sign up to lease a piece of land, and then you find there's no public access, right? So imagine like your land is a circle in the middle, and then there's circle all around that someone else owns, so you can't actually get to it. What do you think happens here, Flora? Did the landlord deliver, under the English rule, possession?
No,
How come?
because you don't have no ways to.
Yes, yes, yes. So possession isn't just someone else is there, but this is you physically can't access the property. Okay. Now, Flora, let me ask you the other question, which is not there. What do you think happens in the American rule? How would this turn out in the American rule?
You need to find a way yourself.
Yes. Yeah, so this is the weird thing, right? Under the American rule, you have legal title to the land, and then you have to take it up yourself with the neighbors. So under the American rule, the lease would be valid. Okay. You want to take a question, the question number 2, please?
Sure. LNT execute a lease for a specified term. He takes possession and pays rent for several months. He then learns that L had earlier leased the premises to another tenant.
Ah, good.
He remained in possession but stopped paying rent. Ceased to pay rent. Counterclaim for it already paid.
Okay, so you can stop there. Okay, so this happens a lot, and I promise you, I mentioned the exam before. Someone will be selling or leasing a piece of property they do not know. I promise you, on the exam, there'll be a question where someone's selling something you don't own, or leasing something you don't own, or selling a piece of property twice. There's fraud in every single property question because it makes things like this work. All right, so the landlord and tenant, by the way, LNT, landlord and tenant, I actually didn't realize that when I was in property, so I always repeat that whenever I teach this now. So LNT have a lease, T takes possession and pays rent, and he learns that another tenant had also been renting it. The other person wasn't there, though. Okay? What happens here? Can T get his rent back? Can the tenant get his rent back?
Well, it's the English rule that he's in possession of it, so he needs to pay rent.
Yes. So can he get his rent back that he already paid?
No.
Can he stop paying rent? That's right. Because he has possession, right? Because he has possession, he's there. Nothing's been violated. So he has to keep paying rent. He can't get a refund. What about the other guy, right? The guy who didn't know about this, who's not living there. Could he be obligated to pay rent?
No.
How come?
He's not there.
Yeah, he's not there. The landlord can't double dip, right? And this comes up a lot. The landlord will lease the same piece of land to 2 people and hoping they both start paying rent. And then maybe if it goes to court, whatever, but he at least gets the money. So the landlord cannot double dip. That is what we call unjust enrichment, if you've heard that phrase in other.
Okay, so in that situation, it's always the one who's in actual possession that has to pay.
Yeah, I think that's how it usually work out.
And then the one who has just legal possession doesn't.
Yep.
Okay, got it.
Questions on that? That's not too bad. All right, let's do the next topic, which are subleases and assignments. So how many of you have ever actually done a sublease? Okay. And I'm assuming for all of you had to get your landlord's permission to do it? Did anyone get a sublease rejected? They couldn't do it? Okay. What, was this in Waco?
Yes.
God, what is it? What are these slumlords in Waco? What'd they do to you?
Well, it was more what we did to the house.
Do I want to know?
There's just some damage there.
I don't want to know. Okay. Oh, God, you guys are bears up there. So, so has anyone ever done an assignment? Ah, you probably didn't even know there's a difference either. Okay. So, Jordan, you want to tell me what's the difference between the sublease and the assignment at a high level? We'll do the details in a couple of minutes.
A sublease is where you are giving away part of your rights. It's like only for a part of what you your lease term. It's not, the whole, not your whole lease term.
Good. Okay, that's good. And what assignment?
The assignment would be where I guess whether you're giving them your whole lease, the whole interest under the lease the whole time.
Very good. Okay. The major difference between the sublease and the assignment is that if you think in terms of the bundle of sticks, I have these two stupid red markers, but in terms of a bundle of sticks, right? The assignment means you're giving someone your entire bundle. You're giving everything they have. If the lease is for 1 year, you give them 365 days, right? You're giving them your entire lease. Sublease is you're giving them something less than the entire thing. So if it's a 12-month lease, maybe you're giving them 11 months, right? But leases aren't just in terms of time, right? Leases are also in terms of responsibilities for paying of the rent. So for those of you who are subleases, right? Did you know that if your good friend who took the sublease didn't pay up, the landlord comes after you? Some of you open your mouths means maybe you didn't read as close as you should have. But if you ever sign a lease and then you sublease it to your good friend, and your good friend decides not to pay up, you are still on the hook as the lessee, right? So let's just explain this. I'm going to use the terminology in the book, which is a little bit confusing with this T1 and T2. So you have the landlord. Oops. You have the lessee, the sublessee. We use these terms because they make it a little bit easier. You have the landlord, you have the lessee, and you have the sublessee. Landlord's the person, of course, who's the landlord. The lessee is the first person who signs the lease. And the sublessee is the person who sublets, if you will. Okay. Generally speaking, in the absence of some other arrangement, you can always contract around this. The reason why the landlord is comfortable doing the sublease is because he knows the lessee is always going to be the hook. If the sublessee drops out, doesn't pay the rent, they come after you. How many of you were aware of that when you did a sublease? Good for you. I didn't know this. I thought, oh hell, sublease, I'm off the hook. I'm free and clear, right? And this is why the apartments aren't so nervous about them, right? They've already approved you, and by the way, if your friend is a deadbeat, then they'll get their money back. Okay. So any questions on that? With an assignment, right? Where a lessee transfers his entire interest, he's cut out of the picture. Okay. With an assignment, the lessee is totally cut out of the picture, and there's no more liability. So assignments are a little bit riskier because now instead of having two possible people to sue for unpaid rent, you only have one. Right? With the assignment, you basically cut out the middleman. The sublessee has, or subassignee will probably be the correct word. The subassignee has all the liability. Questions on this? Okay. Just good to know if you ever want to do a sublease again and you're aware of what your liability may or may not be. Way too many people do subleases. If they actually knew what the liability was, they wouldn't do them.
So in an assignment, the landlord cannot come after the lessee for
Nope.
satisfaction.
Once there's a full, complete assignment, the middleman, he's out of the picture. This is why landlords generally don't like assignments, and they prefer subleases. Right? Usually it happens where college students rent an apartment for the year, and they sublease their assignment. I'm sorry, they sublease their apartment for the summer or whatever it is, right? But it happens otherwise. Did I have?
Can landlords just say you can't have assignments? Can they prevent that purely?
Well, that's the issue in the third case, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. That's the issue in the next case. So generally speaking, at least under modern law, landlords have a lot of discretion to reject assignments for residential leases. Commercial is a different story. You know, if there was a footnote in that case. Residential leases, there's a lot of discretion. And I think it makes a lot more sense, right? If you're a business partner, you might not have you're anonymous. But if you're actually a tenant in an apartment, like my friends in Waco, they might be making a mess, right? They might be doing damage. And you might actually want to have a character screening of who can live there. All right? So, yeah.
I guess it doesn't.
I hope you had a good security deposit.
Yeah. I know my
my friend had a place in Dallas, then he got a job in Houston, and they didn't allow, I guess, subleasing at his place up there.
He was screwed.
And so, but they did allow you to bring in a roommate. So he brought in a roommate, I guess, and like he would still pay the rent himself. And he just had movers come, I guess, and they saw him moving out of the building, but he was able to get away with it and just have our other buddy pay him the monthly rent.
Yeah, so this is a pro tip. Always get a lease in your name because you can get really screwed if you don't. A lot of people kind of just take over for their friend's apartment, just pay the rent. You can get a lot of trouble because if they move to evict, you have no legal claim to be there. Don't put yourself in that position. Always have a lease in your name. Even if it's more expensive, right? Even if you can like have a hidden roommate or whatever, it's not worth it. All right. So the issue in this case, the Ernst case, involves again people who try to take the law into their own hands. If you're sensing a pattern, when people try to write their own leases, and this again was written by the layman, they mess up royally, and they say things that they don't mean. And this case presents the issue of whether something is a sublease, a sublease, or an assignment. And as we'll see, the mere fact that you call it something does not make it so, as is often the case in life. Alex, what happened in the Ernst case?
The plaintiff leads a piece of property to Rogers, and then Rogers went into possession of it and built a racetrack.
Yeah, go-karts.
Yeah.
Wacky races.
Business, a go-kart track business. And he enclosed the premises with a fence.
Mm-hmm.
And then he also, later he sold it, the business, to Conditt. And the plaintiff called him one day and said that he owed rent for November. And he said, no, actually I don't. Rogers told me I don't owe it.
Okay, good. All right. So you have a couple different parties. And again, I'm going to use these terms with the names aren't nearly as important, right? You have the landlord, you have the lessee, and you have the sublessee. So the landlord leases this land to the lessee to make some sort of go-kart track. And the way the agreement is designed, he'll pay some monthly rent for basically 1 year. So from 1960 till 1961. And he can make some improvements on the land, put the grading down, the asphalt, whatever you need for these wacky races, okay? At some point, I guess his business was thriving so much, the lessee brought in someone else, the sublessee, who wanted to buy his business from him. And in addition to buying the business, he wanted to obtain the lease, okay? So the lease itself, and again, this is why people should not be doing this. The second lease says, lessor, who is the landlord, right? The lessor hereby consents to the subletting, not bloodletting, but subletting of the premise to the sublessee. But on the express condition that the original lessee, right, will remain personally liable for the faithful performance of all the blah, 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 okay? So Nick, generally speaking, if this was the only passage, right, this was the only thing that we had to look at in the lease, would this be a lease, a sublease or an assignment? We only looked at this paragraph 5.
Lease.
Okay, good. Why would it be a sublease?
Because it doesn't give all the rights of possession or to the.
Good. Right. Look, it says, it uses the word sublease, right? We always try to follow the intent of the parties by their words. So words are a very good reflection of what parties mean. And it says that the middleman, right, the lessee, remains in the hook. And we said a few minutes ago that the characteristic of a sublessee, the characteristic of a sublease, is that the middleman is always going to be liable. So if we only look at this paragraph 5, it becomes fairly clear from this paragraph alone that we're talking about a sublease. But the problem is we don't just have paragraph 5, right? We have paragraph 3. So the initial lease was only for 1 year, from, was it 1960 to 1961, whatever, right? Marcel, what did the second document do to that term? That's right. How long was the lease? Two years, right. The modified lease was now 2 years. So Marcel, what does that, if we're only looking at this paragraph, right? The initial lease was 1 year, and then they gave not only 1 year, but a second year. Would that seem like a sublease or an assignment? Why?
Because he has no rights left. The term extended past.
Exactly. So the entirety of the estate was given to the sublessee. Everything, plus another year. So generally speaking, right, when you give everything you have, your entire bundle of sticks, plus more, it's an assignment. So we have a problem, right? Paragraph 3 reads like an assignment. Paragraph 5 reads like a sublease. Okay. And Mario, let me ask you this question. This paragraph 5 is worded in a very clear manner, right? Where do you think they got this language from, if you had to guess? No, I mean, where do you think they got this lease from? Do you think they made these words up themselves? Where do laymen usually get these kinds of things from?
Legal advice.
What?
Legal advice.
Oh, they didn't get legal advice here. What do you think they did here? From where?
From another contract.
A form book, right?
Yeah. Form book.
Everyone know what a form book is. I mean, these aren't as useful as they used to be, but if you used to go to a bookstore, those used to exist at one point, you could buy a form book, and the book would say, here are sample leases. You can actually rip it right out of the book, and then you can actually typewrite it in. So if I had to guess, right, this paragraph 5 was a standard, when I say boilerplate, you know what I mean? Template, right? It was a standard boilerplate or standard template for a sublease. But the problem was, this paragraph, they probably wrote it by hand. If you read it, it doesn't read nearly as clear as paragraph 5, right? The portion of the property consisting of about 1 acre, which is not presently devoted to business purposes, percentage of rent, right? If I had to guess, they made this up themselves. So paragraph 5, which was designed for a sublease from a form book, didn't match up with paragraph 3. And I'm positive, or at least I'm pretty positive, that they didn't have, if they had legal representation, it wasn't very good, because they would have had said you can't have these two paragraphs in tension like that, right? So again, so now the court says do, right? So Tanner, how does the court go about figuring out where one part of the lease says it's a sublease, the other part says it's an assignment? What do they do here? Mm-hmm. Uh-huh. Okay, good. So the court says it seems clear that because they want to convey the entirety of the year plus another year, this was not meant to be a sublease, right? This was meant to be an assignment of everything. But Harrison, what do we do about this bit that says the lessee remains liable, the middleman? Do we just ignore that? I mean, what do we do with that?
I guess they did ignore it. I mean, he isn't liable.
Right, under an assignment. So effectively, here's what they said. Because this is an assignment, this provision, number 5, has no meaning. Right? If, as a matter of law, if this is actually an assignment, paragraph 5 has no significance. And of course, this entire case was about unpaid rent, right? So the sublessee was on the hook for everything, and the middleman was on the hook for anything. Okay. The defendant, one second, the sublessee wanted this to be a sublease, right? Jesse, what happens if this was a sublease? Who would be on the hook for the unpaid rent? The middleman, right? So if this was a sublease, the middleman would be on the hook. But because it was an assignment, the sublessee was on the hook for everything himself.
So the sublessee, in his head, he was thinking that he just wanted to pay anything.
Well, it's unclear what they thought, right? We don't actually know what they were thinking. If I had to guess, they probably didn't understand the difference between an assignment and a sublease, and they just copy this from a book.
Well, I'm not talking about when he made the contract. I'm talking about during the suit. He was just trying to.
Oh, he was arguing, right? During the
I'm not
suit.
arguing, I'm just saying, I'm just asking.
No, he was not you. He was arguing. I'm sorry. No, you're not arguing. You're nerd. Sorry, no. No, you're not argumentative. So what happened was during the suit, right? The lessee, the guy in the middle, was like, oh no, this was an assignment. I'm off the hook. And the sublessee, the guy in the bottom, was like, oh no, this is just a sublease. You have to pay these unpaid rents. Because what happened was the second guy took over the car, the business went under, and he wasn't making any money, so he stopped paying his rents. So he was trying to shift the burden of these rents to the other guy.
Oh, yeah, I understand, but had it been a sublease, he wouldn't have to pay anything at all.
No. Had it been a sublease, what would have happened? Say the court held otherwise, right? Say the court held otherwise. It was a sublease. What would have happened? Well, first, the landlord goes after the sublease. If he doesn't pay, then he goes after the middleman. So there are two possible suits that can happen. With a sublease, you first try and sue the person in possession. Say he's bankrupt, has no money, you judge him first, right? Then you go after the middleman. But if it's an assignment, you only get one bite at the apple. You can only go after the sublessee. Lou, I think I skipped you a minute ago.
So paragraph 5, because they decided it's an assignment, everything in paragraph 5 is completely like out the window. So
Basically, yes.
could it be that, if there's an assignment, they're like, okay, we know this is an assignment, but I know it's an assignment, but I still.
Then it's not. Okay, so that's an interesting question, right? Can you do an assignment and still leave the middleman on the hook, right? Is that what you're asking?
Yeah.
It's actually an open question. I think the notes allude to this. In some places, they say if you have anything less than 100% assignment, it's a sublease. So as a matter of law, if it's anything less than a full complete assignment where the middleman's out of the picture, you have a sublease.
Okay.
Not always, and I don't know every state, but at least the one thinking is an assignment means everything. You can't get around this.
So it's
Okay.
not an assignment.
I don't think so.
If a lessee has decided he's going to assign his rights to a third party,
Right.
and the landlord is okay with it, why would the landlord not just cancel the original lease and sign the lease with the?
Because one more person to sue. Right. This is what I just did with Harrison a second ago. Right.
But,
This is two people to sue versus one. It's not a very good reason, but it's at least some more protection for you.
but I thought in an assignment, the lessee is.
That's why landlords don't like assignments. If a landlord has a choice, he'll do a sublease because there's one more person to sue. You can collect from two people rather than one. And it's always better to collect from two people rather than one. Questions?
So for commercial business people who are sophisticated, you should always make sure you make it a sublease.
If you're the landlord, yes.
So
Yes.
on some level in there, right in, you must retain some kind of.
Yes, especially if you're a landlord and you've had a business who wants to sign to someone else, you say, no, do a sublease. It's not a very good reason, but you always want two people to sue rather than one.
Going to language, if I had permission from my landlord to create an assignment, would I just say, I, the lessee, convey all right, title, and interest to you for this leasehold?
Yes, and the language has to be very clear that you're not retaining the interest yourself. And if you think about it, paragraph 5 is affecting, this is kind of the loose question, right? Paragraph 5 is retaining an interest for the sublessee. It's not a very good interest, but he's on the hook for money, right? So this is not a complete 100% assignment. Right? I'm sure you can find a form book of what an assignment looks like, but if I had to guess, they kind of mixed and matched paragraphs and didn't really. This is, again, why people try and take form books and they end up making more trouble than it's worth. Because if they'd actually written what Jason just said, a one-sentence lease saying, I assigned all my rights and that was it, it would have probably been okay for an assignment. Yeah.
If the leasee subleases are signed, but
Yeah, you use these words, it becomes easier.
okay, the landlord and the leasee that have an original lease.
Oh, lessee. Yeah.
lessee sub, it's a sublessee.
Right.
But the original contract has it as a sublease from the lessee to the sublessee. But then the lessee goes back and makes it an assignment just between the two of them. Can he do that? Like,
Whoa, you lost me.
Are they-
I'm sorry. Sorry, I had you at the very end. I was looking to the very end. Try one more time.
All right, so they have a sublease, but then the lessee goes back to the sublessee one-on-one, and then they can, their own assignment, I guess.
Assignment of what though? Of his interest?
Well, they already gave the sublease, but then he went back and added, or, just gave a, he said that I'm not, well, not.
Oh, you're asking, so say it starts off as a sublease and they want to convert it to an assignment later? Is that what you're asking?
Could the lessee?
With the landlord's permission, yes.
Oh, okay, that's cool.
Yeah, I think by that point, you still need the landlord's permission because you're effectively affecting the landlord's rights. Right, so I think the question simply put is, can you convert a sublease into an assignment? Yes, if everyone agrees. Yeah.
Do you have to have, if it's not written in the original lease, do you have to have permission to do a sublease or something?
So I think under the common law, I'm pretty sure you would need the permission because you're affecting the landlord's rights, right? If you think of it just in simple terms, so a landlord signs a lease with someone, they chose that as their tenant, right? They had a relationship. And I think you discussion of privity, don't worry about that. You'll do that next semester. But I think with the privity discussion, I think it would probably be tough not to have the landlord's consent. Whether that's being writing or not, usually you just be in writing, but I'm pretty sure. Yeah.
Thinking bundle of stakes, is the landlord essentially giving away all the stakes except for the future interest whenever they get the leasehold for temporary?
Are you talking about an assignment?
Yeah, just a lease in general. If I lease you and that.
Well, it's only for a duration though. So say if it's for 50 years, you're giving effectively legal title for 1 year. And effectively there's a future interest and the landlord gets it back, if you want to think about it like that. Yeah. What else? Yeah.
If this happens in the sublease and the landlord goes out and the lessor, if the lessee gets to go and sue the sublessee.
I think the order is like this, right? The landlord first sues the sublessee, and then if this person's default or judgment proof, then they go after the lessee. In the event that they sue, right? In the event that the landlord sues the lessee can then bring the sublessee into the case, right? You can plead him or whatever, right? In other words, they both have to be in any suit. So if there's a default, both lessee and sublessee are in the lawsuit. You can't just have one. In other words, landlords like to be able to sue two people instead of one, because if one of them is judgment proof, whatever, you can get your judgment somewhere else. Okay. All right, I think that's good for now on that. Don't worry about the discussion on privity. It's if you read the notes, apparently the Court of Appeals messed it up as well. It's a little bit more complicated than it's worth, and we'll do it more in property too. So don't worry about that for now. The last case, this Kendall versus Ernest Pestana. Where am I up to? Okay. All right, Andrew. Let's talk. What happened in this Kendall case? The last case today.
I did not read this case.
Okay.
Basically, the city of San Jose, they own a hangar, and they leased it to the Privileges.
Mm-hmm.
Then the Privileges subleased it to Robert Dixler.
Okay.
And then Dixler was to run an airplane maintenance business.
Right.
Through the sublease. And then the Privileges assigned their interest in the lease to Pestana.
Good.
And then Dixler gets him to sell his interest to Kendall.
Okay. And then what happened? This is where it goes awry.
Yeah.
What happened there?
Well,
Did the landlord give permission for the assignment?
no, he wanted more rent because
Okay, good.
Kendall was going to be more financially sound. So.
Okay, good. So here's the issue, right? And the parties moved around. I don't really care about the parties so much. The landlord said, you can't assign this because I want more money from you. If you pay me higher rents, which is more than what your lease provides, I'll let you do the assignment. Otherwise, can't do it. So at the outset, Andrew, let's try this one. This is a case from California. What are they about to do? You have to read the case. What are they about to do? It's a case from California.
I mean, I guess it's going to be under common law, not the.
What are they going to do to the common law? Oh, come on, you're killing me. You reverse it, yeah. They're going to reverse the common law. See, even if you don't even do the reading, you can at least get that much right about the assignment, right? The California court is about to reverse, and in fact, they do reverse the common law rule. So again, I think someone asked me a question like this before, but historically, the landlord had very broad discretion. I don't know if that was Alex, yeah. Very broad discretion over accepting or rejecting a sublease or an assignment, right? Why, Jordan, why do you think the landlord might want to have a lot of discretion over who the sublessee is? Why do you think that's important for the landlord?
So he can have some type of control.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, when you sign a lease with someone, you are approving that person or that business because you want that person in your property, right? You're not going to take Andrew because he's going to do damage to your apartment in Waco, right? They're gonna mess up the place on Saturday for game day, right? So you don't want that. You want someone very specific to be in your property. Okay, so it makes sense why you want the person's permission. But the issue here is not whether they can withhold permission, whether that must be reasonable. In other words, does the landlord need to give a reason why they don't want to give it? Alex, what does the court say to this reasonability requirement? Is there a requirement for landlords to be reasonable in giving out these sublicenses? Yeah, we're only talking commercial. No, only commercial. Why does the court say that the landlords have to be reasonable? Amanda?
Because public policy favors amiability.
Good. Oh, in California, it's always public policy, even if they're adopting minority rule, right? Public policy favors alienability. Good. What does that mean?
That they don't want to prevent people from being able to sell or lease the property.
Very good. So the court effectively says we want property to be freely alienable. Alienate means to transfer, to move around. Like the word alien basically means someone who moves around, right? That's what alienability means. We want property to be able to be moving around and be freely available to other people. It's not fair to give a veto to the landlord. The landlord could only act reasonably. So if the incoming tenant has the proper financial requirements, he has whatever background checks, why shouldn't he be able to have the land? Right? Chad, now we're dealing with commercial parties here, right? Was there anything in the lease between these two parties that said the landlord needs to give a reason why he denies a sublease?
I don't remember reading that. I know it did ask for written consent.
Written consent, but did the consent have to be reasonable? No. So here's what's interesting, right? We're not dealing here with unsophisticated parties. These are sophisticated business entities running an airplane business, right? This is not like a mom and pop shop. This is a very business in San Jose. The parties could have requested a reasonability clause. They could have said, if you want to withhold a sublease or an assignment, you need to give a good reason. Judson, what do you think that may have done to the lease if you had included that clause? What do you think the landlord would have asked for to put that clause in? What do you think the landlord would have asked for to put in a reasonability clause? Saying, okay, you know what? I won't withhold my consent unless there's a good reason. What would it have taken to put that clause into the contract? Money. What did the landlord ask for in this case to trigger this entire problem? Money. So you see the problem here, right? If at the front end, at the beginning, the tenant said, okay, I want to sign this lease, but put this language saying you need a good reason to withhold assignments, landlord said, okay, yeah, sure, give me more money. That's how it works. When you want other terms in a contract, the landlord can say, okay, that's fine, give me more money, because that decreases my bundle of sticks, so to speak, right? That decreases my ability to screen tenants. They didn't do that. Instead, at the back end, they say we want to assign the lease, and the landlord asks for more money. Whether it's the same amount, I don't know. It could be the same, different. But what does the court say, Ravi, to that? Does the court say it's a good reason to try to demand more money to issue the assignment? Is that a good enough reason? Why not?
I'm not sure. Was it
Oh, okay, okay. So it was like, okay. So, like a good faith life, but like, okay, in a contract, it wasn't.
Gary, what was it a good reason to want more money? Was that a sufficient reason?
For the reasonability.
Yes.
Clause?
Yes. Well, there wasn't a reasonability clause, but the court effectively read it in. Right? What the court did here was they changed the common law. Again, they said, even for commercial leases, you need to have a good reason. It has to be reasonable why you're withholding consent. Why is asking for more money not reasonable?
Because then I think you're getting into the point where you become kind of extortionist.
Extortion. Ooh, I like that word. Why is this extortion?
Well, just because it's not terribly good faith if you're just saying, hey, I'll give you this for more money. Whereas it depends on how that party needs the.
Okay, good. So, I mean, here's the issue, right? Is it extortion for a landlord to demand more money for you to transfer it? Well, it's very often the case that when your lease is over, and this has happened to me, I'm sure everyone in this room, your rent goes up. It says, okay, if you want to renew your lease, pay me more rent. And the dirty little secret is most landlords make more money when you move out and someone else moves in. Move-in fees, all the other costs. I used to live in one of those Amley properties, which are all over the place. And the person who works there, actually her fiance goes to the school, told me that they make more money when people move out after the 12-month lease, people renew. So they have every incentive to raise your rent significantly, to nudge you to move out, have someone else come in, pay all the moving fees, the amenity fees, those other stupid fees, and a higher market rent, right? So in almost every case, I wouldn't call it extortion, but a landlord has an incentive to make it expensive enough so you don't renew your lease. Is it really that crazy to think that sophisticated commercial parties who could have negotiated for a reasonability clause and didn't are now bound by this, right? But again, the California court says that this is not fair and the policy constraints. The dissent in this case effectively said, these are sophisticated parties, let them stick with what they wrote. They could have done this. They weren't a bunch of go-kart drivers filling out forms from a bookstore, right? These are people who like fix airplanes. This is a significant business. Okay. Does this apply as residential leases? The answer is no. Even for residential leases, right? Even for residential leases, the landlord still has the unilateral power to deny any assignment or sublease. So that can be withheld reasonably or unreasonably. And I guess the thinking is residential leases are much more personal, right? It's a person in an apartment and not an airplane business where you don't ever see the person. Okay. Questions? Have a wonderful weekend. I'll see you all on Monday. And please bring the roll sheet back up.